A very, very, very warm welcome back. This is our fourth session in the Health and Vitality Boot Camp with a focus on nutrition. In this session, we are going to focus on proteins. We're going to discuss what proteins are, what they do in the body, what amino acids are, and where you can get protein from in your diet, looking particularly at the difference between plant and animal-based proteins. Protein is an essential nutrient. Protein is really the building block of the body. Number one, protein is a source of energy. And you'll remember from our first session when we spoke about energy balance, that protein contains plus or minus the same amount of energy per gram as what carbohydrates do. And this is an important factor for people who are wanting to follow a ketogenic or a very low carbohydrate diet. Often we don't realize that protein can actually be converted to glucose in the body, and it contains the same amount of energy, gram per gram, as what carbohydrates do. So if you want to really go into a state of ketosis, one does need to look at the protein sources as well and be careful not to overdo your protein intake, because your body will then definitely convert that to glucose and you might jeopardize your ketosis efforts. The second thing that protein does is that it's very important for structure. So in all of our body cells, protein is really the predominant molecule that makes up what we are. It has multiple functions within the cells, and also many of our hormones and enzymes and chemical messengers in the body are made from proteins. So what proteins look like when you look at them from a molecular point of view are multiple amino acids that are strung together, similar to what carbohydrates are, in that they are multiple smaller molecules that are bonded together with chemical bonds. And so a protein is quite a big complex molecule made of smaller amino acids all stuck together. When we eat a protein, it goes through the process of digestion, and those amino acids are then broken down into individual particles, which are small enough to be absorbed by the intestine. Now, what's interesting is that we have essential and non-essential amino acids. Now, what that means is that our body has the capacity to actually manufacture amino acids. We can take smaller molecules and components, and from those create amino acids, which can then be used by the body for certain functions. These are called non-essential amino acids, and that means that you do not actually have to eat them in your diet because your body can make them and manufacture them itself. However, we have essential amino acids, and those you have to get from an external source because your body cannot actually make those itself. So you have to be able to get those in your diet and through nutrition in order that you have a proper protein and amino acid balance. So how do we get the full complement of amino acids in our diet? Well, the first option is to have animal-based protein. So here we are talking about meat, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy. What animal proteins are is that they are a complete protein. That means that they contain all the essential and non-essential amino acids. So for instance, if you eat a steak or you eat a chicken breast or you eat some fish or perhaps some eggs, you know that you are going to get the full complement of amino acids from that particular food. And that means that you don't really have to think too much if you are not vegetarian or vegan about being sure that you're getting your full complement of protein in the diet. Plant-based protein, however, is a little bit more complicated. So the sources of plant-based protein are nuts and seeds, lentils, pulses, all of our dried grains, etc. Soy products, so these are our edamame beans, our tofu, our tempeh, as well as grains. Grains actually contain quite a lot of protein. Wild rice, steel-cut oats, as well as my personal favorite, which is quinoa, which actually has got a full complement of amino acids in it. However, most of the time, plant-based proteins are incomplete. That means that you might not get all of the essential acids if you only eat one plant-based protein. So let's say, for example, if you look at rice, rice will contain a certain number of the essential amino acids, but not all of them. So if you in your one meal want to make sure that you are going to get all the amino acids, you would need to combine that portion of rice with something else. And traditional diets, it's quite amazing how the world has adapted to these things. But traditional diets where rice is a staple tend to be paired with other things that then complement it very well. So the one thing that we know will complement rice to give you a full supply of your essential amino acids is lentils. And often we will see, particularly in diets that are predominantly vegetarian, your rice will be combined with a portion of lentils. The good thing about plant-based protein is that they contain additional nutrients that are really good for you. So there are added benefits to having more plant-based proteins. The first is that they have a lot more fiber. They tend to have higher amounts of vitamins and minerals, and they're quite tasty and versatile in your cooking. So I encourage people to have a lot more plant-based protein because they have additional health benefits for you. And of course, you don't need to limit yourself. You can happily have an animal-based protein and a plant-based protein in the same meal, and you know then that you will be getting a good complement of protein as well as additional health benefits. So the question that is often asked is, how much protein do I actually need? And you might be surprised. Most people in the Western world tend to eat an excess of protein. We tend to be getting way more than what our bodies actually need. So if you look at your body weight, you need about 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. So for a typical person who weighs, let's say, 70 kilograms, that equates to between 56 and maybe 80 grams of protein per day, which is actually not that much. And please remember, like I mentioned before, that protein is not stored. So if it's not going to be used for repairing tissues, making new cells, creating hormones and enzymes, and there's excess protein around, what will happen is that your body will convert that excess protein into glucose, which then can be stored as fat. So please just remember that. Some people, however, do need a little bit more protein. So babies and children need a lot more protein because they are going through a phase of rapid growth. And obviously, when we're growing, we do need more protein in order to build the body structures. Athletes and people who exercise intensively also need a bit more protein per gram of body weight to maintain their level of activity. And people who are recovering from illness or surgery need to have more protein. Again, because protein is used in the healing process, in restoring tissues, in building new tissues, and in maintaining good integrity of the organ. During pregnancy, obviously, because we're manufacturing a new human being from scratch, you need to have a little bit more protein there as well. And the same goes for when we're breastfeeding. You need a bit more protein because you are supplying another little person with additional protein and nutrition. So you do need to then take a little bit more protein yourself in order to keep your body in optimal shape. Many people do use protein as a method for weight loss, and there are some factors that are quite important to note and potentially to take advantage of if you want to lose weight. The first thing is that protein has an appetite suppressant effect. So what that means is that when you've had a protein-based meal, you feel fuller for longer, and you tend not to feel hungry very quickly after that meal. And we think the reason for that is because protein needs quite a long time to break down. Remember, protein is quite a complex structure, so to break it down into those smaller amino acid components takes quite a lot of digestive effort, but it also takes a long time. And protein is predominantly broken down in the stomach. It requires a lot of exposure to stomach acid and to the digestive juices before it can go down into the intestine in a more absorbable form. So it slows down the rate at which your stomach empties. So your stomach will stay fuller for longer from a mechanical and a real perspective rather than just what you are sensing as well if you have a high protein meal. There are some hormonal effects of high protein diets as well. We tend to see a little bit of a change in the cortisol, in the testosterone, and the hormone balance in the body that can also tend towards a little bit more weight loss. And so we can also see that the body composition changes in people who tend to have a higher protein diet. You do need to be careful though. Number one, of excessive protein, as we mentioned, because number one, that protein can be converted to glucose. It can jeopardize any ketogenic aims or goals that you have, and also that glucose can be stored as fat. And secondly, proteins do have waste products when they are digested and when they are used in the body. So you do produce a bit more waste and a bit more nitrogen-based wastes that have to be removed from the body through the system of the kidneys. So high protein diets can put a lot of stress on your kidneys and your kidney system. And for that reason, we do need to be a little bit cautious of the amount of protein that we take in and not to have excessive protein in the diet because there can be long-term health consequences. I hope that you have enjoyed this particular section, that you've learned a little bit more about the digestion of proteins as well as how they are used in the body. And I look forward to chatting again in our next session. Take care.